A single mother missed a job interview to save a little girl and discovered that she was the key to changing her destiny. The child was the daughter of an influential man who saw in that woman the strength that time had taken from him. The invitation to care for the girl became an unbreakable bond. And so, amid prejudice, social differences, and an unlikely love, she stopped being just a survivor and became essential. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Continuing. Louisa woke up even before her alarm clock rang. The anxiety of the job interview hadn't allowed for a peaceful night's sleep. In the small one-room apartment in an inner-city neighborhood of Portland, she moved carefully so as not to wake Annie, her 7-year-old daughter, who was sleeping soundly in the double bed they shared. That interview meant much more than a simple job. It was the opportunity to finally escape the financial struggle that had accompanied them since Annie's father disappeared, without a trace when the girl was just 2 years old. Since then, Louisa had survived on temporary jobs as a receptionist, cleaner, and telemarketing agent, always prioritizing hours compatible with her daughter's school schedule. "Mom, you're going to make it," Annie murmured, having woken up and watching Louisa mend the hem of the only pair of dress pants she owned. "You think so?" Louisa smiled, trying to hide her nervousness. "Then help me review the questions we practiced yesterday." As she sewed, Annie recited aloud the possible interview questions, mixing them with the multiplication tables she was learning at school. The synchronicity between mother and daughter demonstrated the complicity built over years of solitary partnership. The apartment, though small, was impeccably clean. The peeling walls contrasted with the meticulous organization of the few pieces of furniture. In one corner, piles of freshly washed clothes awaited folding. In the bathroom, a cracked mirror reflected Louisa's determined face as she applied a discreet lipstick with her fingers, wasting none of the almost finished product. "How do I look?" she asked, adjusting the business suit she had bought at a thrift store weeks earlier, saving every cent from the extra cleaning jobs she had taken on weekends. "Beautiful, Mom," Annie exclaimed with childish sincerity. "You look like those important women on TV." Louisa smiled, tying her curly hair into a discreet bun. She didn't have money for a salon, but YouTube and practice had been good teachers over the past few years. After a simple breakfast, mother and daughter set out for the long journey to the city center. First, they would drop Annie off at the neighborhood public school. Then Louisa would face 2 crowded buses and a considerable walk to the private hospital, where the interview for administrative assistant would take place. "Remember, if I get this job, we'll be able to buy that art material you want so much," Louisa commented, as they walked briskly through the still dark streets of the outskirts. "And we'll be able to eat pizza once a month," Annie added, dreaming of possibilities that for many would be trivial, but for them represented luxury. At the school gate, Annie hugged her mother tightly. "Good luck, Mom. You're the best person in the whole world." With her heart warmed by those words, Louisa continued her journey. Her high heels, also bought on sale, were already starting to hurt her feet after the first bus. But she couldn't afford to complain. That pain was the price for the chance to change their lives. She arrived at the hospital 15 minutes early, enough time to reapply her lipstick in the restroom and rehearse the answers she had prepared one more time. The luxurious reception area of the private hospital was intimidating, with its elegant furniture and impeccably dressed staff. Louisa took a deep breath, reminding herself of why she was there. Ms. Louisa Oliver, an elegant secretary, called, leading her to a meeting room where 3 people were waiting. The interview began formally, with technical questions about previous experiences and knowledge of administrative systems. Louisa answered with rehearsed confidence until the question she feared arrived. "We noticed a gap of almost 5 years in your resume. Can you explain the reason?" asked the woman who appeared to be leading the selection process, Dr. Beatrice, the administrative director. Louisa hesitated for a second, considering inventing a story, but opted for the truth. "During that period, I became a single mother and needed to prioritize caring for my daughter. I worked informally as a freelancer to reconcile her schedule. The interviewer's expression was difficult to decipher. I understand, and if hired, How do you plan to handle emergencies related to your daughter? We need someone fully committed to the position. My daughter is well adapted to the school routine now, and I have a neighbor who can help in emergencies, Louisa replied, feeling that she was losing points with every word about Annie. The interview continued for another 20 minutes. At the end, Dr. Beatrice offered a restrained smile. I appreciate your sincerity, Louisa. We have a few more candidates to interview today, but we will contact you by tomorrow with our decision. With a firm handshake, Louisa thanked them for the opportunity. She left the office building feeling a mix of hope and apprehension. She had done well on the technical questions, but her hesitation in mentioning her single mother status might have jeopardized everything. It was almost 11 in the morning when she left the hospital. She had enough time to catch the bus back and pick Annie up from school at 1 p.m. As she crossed the busy avenue in front of St. Francis Hospital, she heard screams and the sound of a bouncing ball. Turning quickly, she saw a girl approximately Annie's age running towards the street, chasing a colorful ball that rolled into the middle of the avenue. At the same time, a speeding car approached. Without a second thought, Louisa ran towards the child. Time seemed to slow down. With an impulse, she grabbed the girl by the waist and threw herself to the side, falling onto the median strip that separated the sidewalk from the avenue. The car grazed past, lost control, and hit a protective barrier a few meters ahead. Lying on the grass with the frightened child in her arms, Louisa felt a sharp pain in her knee and realized that her precious dress pants were torn and stained with dirt and blood. Her blouse was not in much better condition either. "Sophia! My God, Sophia!" A man in a suit ran towards them, terror etched on his face, giving way to uncontrollable relief upon seeing the girl conscious, just startled. "Are you okay? Daughter, are you okay?" The girl, still in shock, merely nodded positively, clinging to Louisa's neck. Around them, passers-by gathered, some filming with cell phones, others helping the dazed driver who was emerging from the crashed car. "You saved my daughter," the man said, helping Louisa to her feet. It was then that she realized how badly she was hurt. Her knee was bleeding, her hands were scraped, and a pain in her side indicated possible rib contusions. "I need to take you to a hospital right now." "It's not necessary, I'm fine," Louisa tried to argue, thinking of the cost of medical care she couldn't afford. "I insist," he replied emphatically. "I'm Raymond Miller, and you just saved my daughter Sophia. Please let me help you." Louisa finally yielded, not because of the pain she felt, but upon seeing the clock and realizing that, no matter what she did, her job interview was ruined. With her clothes in that condition, there was no way she could go back and make a good impression. "I just need to make a call," she murmured, thinking of Annie. "My daughter gets out of school in a few hours." "Of course, use my phone," Raymond offered as he supported Sophia, who was finally beginning to cry, processing the shock. "And don't worry about your daughter. We'll pick you up from the hospital in time, I promise." As she dialed her neighbor's number, asking for the favor of picking Annie up from school, Louisa observed Raymond and Sophia's elegant clothes, the luxury car parked near the hospital, and thought of the irony of the situation. She had lost the chance at a life-changing job to save a child who seemed to have everything she dreamed of being able to give her own daughter. The hospital care was swift, and to Louisa's relief, Raymond insisted on covering all costs. The diagnosis confirmed contusions to her knee and ribs, as well as several abrasions on her body. The doctor prescribed painkillers, ointment for the bruises, and recommended 3 days of rest, advice Louisa knew was impossible to follow. "I need to thank you again," Raymond said, as they waited for the medications at the hospital pharmacy. Sophia remained silent, sitting between them, still processing the fright. "What happened today could have been—" "No need to mention it," Louisa interrupted, realizing the man was struggling not to imagine the worst-case scenario. "Anyone would have done the same." "I disagree," he replied with a sad smile. "We live in times where many prefer to film a tragedy rather than prevent it." Louisa took a better look at the man in front of her. Raymond appeared to be around 40, with slightly graying hair at his temples and tired eyes that suggested sleepless nights. Despite his impeccable suit and a watch that certainly cost more than everything she owned, there was something vulnerable in his posture. "Daddy, she hurt her knee because of me," Sophia finally murmured, tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I just wanted to get my ball. Don't worry, darling. Accidents happen. Louisa smiled, ignoring the pain as she leaned down to be at the girl's height. The important thing is that you're okay. We need to compensate you somehow, Raymond insisted, handing the bag of medications to Louisa. At the very least, replace your damaged clothes. Louisa thought of the lost interview, the overdue bills, and the almost empty refrigerator waiting for her. At home. Still, her pride spoke louder. It's really not necessary. Noticing her resistance, Raymond didn't insist, but asked for her phone number. Just to know if you're recovering well, he explained. Embarrassed, Louisa admitted, I don't have a cell phone right now, but I can write down your number. She took out a small worn notepad from her bag, where she jotted down messages and reminders. Raymond dictated his landline and cell phone numbers, which she carefully recorded. As they were about to say goodbye, Louisa looked at her watch and her heart tightened. I need to pick up my daughter from school. I'll drive you, Raymond offered immediately. It's the least I can do. The drive to the outskirts was silent and uncomfortable. Sophia had fallen asleep in the back seat. While Louisa watched through the window, the contrast between the neighborhoods they passed through, from the luxury of the heights to the raw reality of the South End. She gave directions in short sentences, embarrassed to reveal where she lived. When they arrived at the school, Annie was waiting at the gate, chatting animatedly with the secretary, who always stayed with students whose parents were late. Seeing her mother get out of the imported car, her eyes widened in surprise. Mom! Are you hurt? She asked, running towards Louisa, completely ignoring the luxurious vehicle and its owner. Just a small accident, honey. Nothing serious. Louisa hugged her, suppressing a wince of pain. This is Mr. Raymond and his daughter, Sophia, who's sleeping in the car. Annie waved shyly at Raymond, her childish curiosity evident. Did you get the job, Mom? The innocent question hit Louisa like a punch. Not this time, darling. But other opportunities will come. Noticing the discomfort, Raymond intervened. Can I drop you off at home? Despite her reluctance, Louisa accepted. The idea of facing crowded buses with the pain she felt was disheartening. During the final stretch of the journey, Annie naturally took on the role of guide, pointing out important places in the neighborhood to Raymond. The bakery, where they sometimes bought day-old bread at a discount, the community library, where they spent entire afternoons on weekends, the makeshift field, where she played under her mother's watchful eye. When they arrived at the small apartment building, Louisa thanked him again and said goodbye, believing that would be the end of that strange encounter between such distinct worlds. The next morning, as she helped Annie with homework at the makeshift table that served for both meals and studies, the landline in the hallway rang. The building superintendent knocked on the door, informing her there was a call for her. Ms. Louisa Oliver? This is Raymond Miller from yesterday. The voice sounded formal on the other end of the line. I'd like to know how you're feeling today. Surprised by the call, Louisa politely replied about her recovery, downplaying the aches she still felt. After a few minutes of cordial conversation, Raymond made an unexpected invitation. Sophia hasn't stopped talking about you and your daughter. I'd like to invite you both to lunch on Sunday. It would be a small way of saying thank you. Louisa's first impulse was to refuse. What would they have in common beyond that moment of crisis? But looking at Annie, who was smiling hopefully beside her after understanding what the call was about, she hesitated. It would be a pleasure, she finally replied. But I'd prefer a simple place, if you don't mind. They agreed to meet at a family restaurant in the Chinatown neighborhood, a neutral territory that would make Louisa uncomfortable, neither with the simplicity of her own neighborhood, nor with the luxury Raymond likely frequented. On Sunday, Louisa wore her second-best outfit, a navy blue skirt and a white blouse, saved for special occasions like school meetings. Annie wore her favorite dress, a birthday gift from the neighbor who was a seamstress. They arrived at the restaurant a few minutes before the agreed time. Raymond and Sophia were already waiting for them, both dressed more casually than on the day of the accident, but still in clothes that betrayed their privileged financial status. Sophia didn't sleep well from so much anxiety, Raymond commented, after the initial greetings. To Louisa's surprise, the girls connected instantly, as if they had known each other for years. While the adults maintained a polite conversation about trivialities, Annie and Sophia exchanged secrets, laughs, and drew together in the notebook Annie always carried. "Your daughter is very talented," Raymond observed. Seeing the drawings Annie was showing Sophia. "Does she take art classes?" Louisa felt her face flush. "We can't afford extra classes right now, but she watches a lot of online tutorials when we manage to use the library computer." During lunch, Louisa noticed how Raymond treated the girls, his and hers, with the same respect and attention. There was no condescension in his voice, just genuine interest in the children's stories they told, interspersed with laughter and knowing glances. While the girls ate dessert, the conversation between the adults deepened. Raymond revealed he owned a software company, working mostly from home since losing his wife to an illness 2 years prior. "It's been difficult to balance the company with Sophia's care," he admitted. "I hired a few nannies, but none stayed for long. Sophia is demanding." He smiled fondly at his daughter, who was currently teaching Annie how to fold a napkin into a bird shape. "Children notice when someone truly cares," Louisa commented, observing the girls' interaction. It was at that moment that Raymond made a proposal that would change their lives. "Louisa, I know this might seem sudden, but I have a proposal for you." He hesitated for a moment. "Sophia has been feeling very lonely since she lost her mother. She's always alone at home with nannies who don't stay while I work in my office. So after seeing how you treated her and how well our daughters got along, I thought, would you consider working as her caregiver during the afternoons?" The proposal caught Louisa by surprise. I don't have specific training for that." "I'm not looking for diplomas," Raymond replied. "I'm looking for someone who sees my daughter as a person, not an obligation. The salary would be higher than what you mentioned for the hospital position, and the hours would allow you to pick Annie up from school and bring her along." Louisa felt a whirlwind of emotions. It was an unexpected opportunity, fallen from the sky after the disappointment of the lost interview. But it also meant entering a world that was not hers, creating expectations in Annie about a reality they couldn't sustain on their own. "Can I think about it?" she asked, genuinely confused. "Of course," Raymond agreed. "Meanwhile, would you like another coffee?" As she watched the girls, now inventing a story with characters made of napkins, Louisa thought that perhaps, just perhaps, the universe was offering not just a job, but a bridge between two worlds that rarely met. And when they did, it was usually not on equal terms. What she didn't imagine was that this bridge would be much more complex and transformative than she could have supposed at that moment of decision. After 2 nights of intense reflection, Louisa accepted Raymond's proposal. The decision wasn't easy. A mix of financial necessity and the intuition that there was something special about the connection between the girls outweighed her fears. On her first day of work, Louisa and Annie arrived at the elegant condominium in the Heights with nervous punctuality. The doorman, after consulting Raymond via intercom, allowed their entry with a look that blended curiosity and distrust. "Apartment 1201, Tower A," he informed dryly. In the mirrored elevator, Louisa adjusted her simple but clean clothes, while Annie watched the illuminated buttons with fascination. Upon reaching the 12th floor, they were greeted by Sophia, who opened the door even before they rang the doorbell. "You really came," the girl exclaimed, hugging Annie first and then Louisa with disconcerting enthusiasm. "Daddy's finishing a meeting in his office, but he said he'll be right out." The apartment was spacious, with large windows that framed the city. Different from what Louisa had imagined, it wasn't ostentatiously luxurious but comfortable and inviting. On the walls were photographs of Sophia at different ages, many of them accompanied by a gentle, smiling woman, whom Louisa deduced was Raymond's late wife. Children's drawings were proudly displayed on a large mural in the living room, and books occupied practically every available surface. "Come see my room." Sophia pulled Annie by the hand, running down the hallway. Louisa followed them more slowly, observing the details that revealed a family in the process of reorganization, some boxes still closed in a corner, a calendar with appointments written in hurried masculine handwriting, a refrigerator covered with notes and drawings. In Sophia's room, a true explosion of colors and toys awaited. Annie looked at everything with wide eyes, especially the shelf overflowing with art supplies, paints, brushes, modeling clay, special papers. "You can use them whenever you want," Sophia offered generously. "I never have anyone to draw with." Louisa felt a pang in her chest. Despite all the financial difficulties, Annie had never shown envy or covetousness. Even now, faced with so much, the girl smiled politely, but without the greedy dazzlement that many would have. "Thank you, but we don't want to bother you," Louisa replied. Cautiously. "It's no bother," the male voice came from the bedroom door. Raymond observed the scene with his hands in his pockets. Sophia has too many things for one child. Sharing will do her good. They then established a routine that, to Louisa's surprise, flowed naturally from the first day. She would pick Sophia up from her private school at 2 p.m., bringing Annie along. They would return to the apartment, where she would prepare a healthy snack for the girls, help with homework, and supervise their playtime until Raymond arrived, usually around 6:30 p.m. The girls, despite their very different backgrounds, complemented each other in a surprising way. Sophia, an only child accustomed to having everything, learned from Annie the value of creativity and simplicity. Annie, in turn, discovered new horizons through the books and educational games Sophia possessed. "You have a special way with children," Raymond commented one afternoon. Arriving early and finding Louisa mediating an art exhibition the girls had organized in the living room. Sophia was never this happy with the other nannies. "I'm not a nanny," Louisa replied firmly. "I'm a caregiver. And I try to treat Sophia as I would Annie, with respect for her individuality." Raymond smiled, agreeing with a nod. That's exactly what makes the difference. As the weeks passed, Louisa noticed subtle changes in her own life. The generous salary allowed her to rent a better apartment, still on the outskirts, but with 2 bedrooms and no leaks. She could buy quality school supplies for Annie and even start a small savings fund. But the deeper transformations were happening on an emotional level. The girls became inseparable, creating a bond that transcended socio-economic differences. Louisa also noticed changes in Raymond, who gradually abandoned his initial formal demeanor and became more relaxed and open. One episode, in particular, marked a turning point in the relationship between the adults. On a rainy evening, Raymond arrived home with a severe migraine, the result of a stressful day of negotiations. "The girls have already had dinner and are drawing in their room," Louisa informed him, concerned to see his pale face. "Are you okay?" "Just a headache," he downplayed, massaging his temples. "It's part of the package of being a businessman and a single father." "I know that package well, only the job title changes," Louisa joked. "Wait a moment." She went to the kitchen and, with the familiarity of someone who knew the space well, prepared an herbal tea she always used when Annie fell ill. As she handed the steaming cup to Raymond, she explained, "My grandmother used to say that headaches are the body asking for a break. The tea helps, but the real remedy is to slow down." Raymond took a sip and looked at her with curiosity. "How do you manage? Raising a daughter alone, working, studying, all without losing that calm?" "Calm?" Louisa laughed. "I have a collection of sleepless nights and crying fits in the bathroom that prove otherwise. I've just learned that despairing solves nothing." That was the first of many honest conversations they shared. They discovered, surprised, that despite drastically different contexts, the internal struggles of single parents held deep similarities. The loneliness of decisions, the constant fear of failing, the guilt of not being able to be present all the time, the apprehension about the future. "Sophia asks about her mother every night," Raymond confided in one of these conversations. "And no matter how many books I read about helping children cope with loss, I never feel prepared to answer." "Annie also asks about her father, even though she never lived with him," Louisa replied. "I think there are no right answers, just true presence." As the months passed, the professional relationship subtly transformed into something more complex. Raymond began inviting Louisa and Annie for outings on weekends, movies, the park, picnics. The boundaries between work and friendship became increasingly blurred. It was during one of these Sunday outings in Metropolitan Park that Mrs. Carmen, Raymond's mother, appeared without prior notice. An elegant woman with an haughty demeanor, she approached the group who were playing animatedly near the lake. "Raymond, what a surprise to find you here." Her melodious voice didn't match the assessing gaze she directed at Louisa. "I tried calling several times." "Mother." Raymond stood up, visibly uncomfortable. "I didn't know you were coming back from Aspen today." "Clearly," Mrs. Carmen replied with a restrained smile. She then turned to Louisa and the girls. "And these must be—" Raymond made the formal introductions, explaining that Louisa was Sophia's caregiver, conveniently omitting the extraordinary circumstances of how they met. Annie was introduced as Sophia's school friend, another small distortion of the truth. Mrs. Carman maintained her politeness throughout the encounter, but Louisa noticed the suspicious glances and subtly invasive questions. When the girls ran off to buy ice cream at a nearby stand, accompanied by Raymond, the matriarch took the opportunity to address Louisa directly. "My daughter-in-law was a pediatrician, a Harvard graduate," she commented casually. "Sophia truly misses an appropriate maternal figure." The comment, made with surgical precision, hit Louisa hard. For the first time since she started working for Raymond, she felt profoundly out of place. The reality of social differences, temporarily suspended in the bubble of coexistence they had created, returned with full force. "Sophia is a wonderful child," Louisa replied with dignity. "I am merely her caregiver, but I do my best to ensure she feels safe and loved." Mrs. Carman smiled condescendingly. "I'm sure you do, dear. Just don't confuse the roles. Different worlds rarely mix without unpleasant consequences." Raymond's and the girls' return interrupted the conversation, but the damage was done. For the rest of the outing, Louisa remained quiet and distant. At the end of the day, she politely declined the dinner invitation, citing pending household chores. That night, lying in bed while Annie slept peacefully beside her, Louisa faced doubts she believed she had overcome. Was she creating illusions for herself and her daughter? Would it be healthy for Annie to get used to a reality that wasn't hers? And above all, was she developing feelings for Raymond that could never be reciprocated on equal terms? The following week unfolded with renewed formality. Louisa confined herself to her professional duties, avoiding the personal conversations that had become habitual. Raymond noticed the change but respected her distance, attributing it perhaps to fatigue. On Friday, as he handed her the weekly payment, he finally asked, "Did I do something that bothered you, Louisa?" She hesitated, torn between sincerity and self-preservation. "No, I just realized we need to keep things professional." "It's better for everyone." "It was something my mother said, wasn't it?" Raymond sighed, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration. "She has strong opinions about everything, especially about how I should raise Sophia." "Your mother merely verbalized what is obvious," Louisa replied, gathering courage. "We belong to different worlds, Raymond, and no matter how much I try to ignore it, at the end of the day, I am just the employee who takes care of your daughter." The phone rang before Raymond could respond, saving Louisa from a prolongation of that painful conversation. She took the opportunity to call Annie, who said goodbye to Sophia with their usual tight hug. "See you Monday, Sophia." "Take good care of our drawings," Annie asked, referring to the art project they were developing together. "I promise," Sophia replied, seeming to intuit the tension between the adults. "You really will come back, right, Aunt Louisa?" The question, laden with childish insecurity, made Louisa hesitate. The girl had already lost her mother. She feared losing the female figure who had brought stability back into her life. "Of course," Louisa assured her, hugging her affectionately. "I'll be here on Monday, as always." While waiting for the elevator, holding Annie's hand, Louisa wondered if she was doing the right thing by maintaining that emotional distance. It was one thing to protect her own heart from disappointments. It was quite another to deny the girls the genuine friendship they had built. What she didn't know was that Mrs. Carman had already called a family meeting for the weekend, determined to put things in order regarding a situation she considered inappropriate. She also didn't imagine that the words exchanged at that gathering would be the catalyst for decisions that would definitively change the course of all their lives. The family lunch at the Miller's mansion on Sunday was exactly as Mrs. Carman had planned, a calculated display of status and tradition. The solid mahogany table seated 12 people, although only 4 were present: herself, Raymond, Sophia, and Roderick, Raymond's older brother, a renowned lawyer who rarely left his office in downtown New York City. "So this employee has free access to your apartment and brings her daughter along?" Roderick questioned, meticulously cutting the filet mignon on his plate. "Have you properly checked her background?" "Louisa saved Sophia's life," Raymond replied dryly. "And yes, she was properly vetted. Sophia, sitting silently before an almost untouched plate, intervened with the typical honesty of children. "I like Aunt Louisa and Annie. They make me genuinely laugh, not like adults pretending children are funny." Mrs. Carmen smiled condescendingly. "Darling, no one doubts that this young woman is pleasant, but there are appropriate boundaries between employees and employers that seem to be ignored." "What boundaries exactly?" Raymond challenged, dropping his cutlery with more force than necessary. "Louisa is competent, reliable, and Sophia is happier than she has been in the last 2 years. We're worried about you." "My son." Mrs. Carmen softened her tone, casting a significant glance at her brother. "Since Beatrice left us, you've isolated yourself. It's natural to seek connections, but you must choose the right people for your life and Sophia's." "People from our circle," Roderick added bluntly. "Remember Caroline Madison, the Mendonca's daughter? Divorced a year ago, a pediatrician like Beatrice from a traditional family. She'd be perfect for you and Sophia." Sophia pushed her plate away, her eyes brimming with tears. "I don't want another mother. I want mine, and since that can't be, I want Aunt Louisa and Annie." "Sophia, darling, go with Rosa to the kitchen to get dessert, won't you?" Mrs. Carmen asked, referring to the housekeeper who was discreetly waiting in a corner. When the girl left, the matriarch abandoned the subtleties. "Raymond, I know you're still vulnerable, but you need to wake up. This woman is obviously manipulating your relationship with Sophia to secure a privileged position. Here's the old gold digger scheme, just with a different strategy." "Enough." Raymond stood up, his hands trembling with suppressed anger. "You don't know Louisa. She has more integrity than many people from our circle. And if she wanted to manipulate me, she would have accepted my dinner invitation yesterday, instead of maintaining professional distance." Mrs. Carmen raised her eyebrows, surprised. "So you're already extending personal invitations?" "Worse than I imagined. Mother, with all due respect, my personal life is not up for discussion. Sophia is happy. I'm managing the company well. And if Louisa brings stability to our routine, that should be a reason for gratitude, not judgment." Sophia's return with an elaborate chocolate cake temporarily ended the confrontation, but the atmosphere remained tense. After dessert, Raymond invented some excuse and left with his daughter, leaving behind a Mrs. Carmen determined to save her son from himself, as she confided to Roderick while they had liqueur on the terrace. On Monday, Louisa immediately noticed something was different. Raymond, usually busy in his office when she arrived, was waiting in the living room with Sophia. His smile seemed forced, but his eyes conveyed a new intensity. "Sophia, why don't you show Annie that new game on your tablet?" "I need to talk to Aunt Louisa for a moment," he asked as soon as he greeted them. When the girls left, Raymond gestured to the sofa. "Can we talk?" "Did something happen to Sophia?" Louisa asked, concerned. "Not exactly." He hesitated, carefully choosing his words. "We had a family lunch yesterday. It was challenging." "I understand," Louisa nodded, imagining the tenor of the conversations. "Actually, you don't understand," Raymond replied with a sad smile. "My family thinks you're an opportunist trying to take advantage of a vulnerable widower and his impressionable daughter." Louisa paled, feeling physically struck by the brutal frankness. "Perhaps it's better if I look for another job." "No!" Raymond approached, impulsively taking her hands. "I'm sorry for how I said that. I want you to understand that I completely disagree with them. In fact, our conversation on Friday and this lunch made me realize something important." Louisa gently withdrew her hands, her heart racing. "Raymond, I really think we should keep things professional, as I said. The problem is I can no longer see our relationship as merely professional," he confessed. "You and Annie brought something back into our lives that I thought I had lost forever. Genuine joy, spontaneity, the feeling of family. Sophia is flourishing. And he paused, gathering courage. "I'm allowing myself to feel again." Louisa stood up, walking to the window to gain distance and clarity. The city view stretched out below, constantly reminding her of the distance between their worlds. "Your world is not mine, Raymond. Your mother is right about that. To hell with her world." The vehemence in his voice surprised her. "The world I want to build is one where Sophia smiles every day, where I can share a coffee and an honest conversation at the end of the day, where I don't have to pretend to be someone I'm not." "And how would that work in practice?" Louisa questioned, turning to face him. "Have you stopped to think about what people would say? What your family would do?" What Sophia would face at school if they knew her father was dating the nanny. Caregiver, he corrected with a half-smile, using the term she always insisted on. And yes, I've thought about all of that, but I've also thought about what I will face if I let the prejudice of others determine my happiness and Sophia's. That conversation was interrupted by the girl's return, eager to show something on the tablet. The rest of the day unfolded with apparent normality, but a different energy lingered in the air, a mixture of possibility and apprehension. On Thursday of that week, as Louisa organized Sophia's school supplies for the next day, she received an unexpected call, a job offer from St. Francis Hospital, where she had interviewed on the fateful day of the accident. We were impressed with your profile and would like to offer you the administrative assistant position, explained the same Dr. Beatrice who had interviewed her. The salary is competitive, and we offer health insurance for you and your dependent. It was the opportunity Louisa had long awaited: stability, benefits, a career with growth potential. But a full-time commitment would mean giving up time with Annie and the special connection she had formed with Sophia. Worse, it could mean a definitive separation from Raymond, whose words still echoed in her heart, no matter how much she tried to ignore them. "Can I give you my answer on Monday?" she asked, needing time to process everything. Throughout the weekend, Louisa wrestled with doubts. On Saturday afternoon, she took Annie to the neighborhood playground, watching her play while weighing the pros and cons of each path. It was there, sitting on a worn bench, that she witnessed a scene that deeply shook her. An elegant woman, clearly upper-class judging by the imported car parked nearby and her designer clothes, was yelling at her small daughter who had spilled yogurt, staining her dress. "Look what you did! Always clumsy, always embarrassing me!" she shrieked, shaking the child by the arm while other mothers watched uncomfortably. That moment crystallized something Louisa had been intuitively feeling. Money, social position, appearance, none of it guaranteed true love or correct values. What mattered was character, integrity, the ability to love and respect others in their individuality. On Monday, Louisa arrived early at Raymond's apartment, determined to have a definitive conversation before the girls got out of school. She found him working in his office, his concentrated expression softening when he saw her. "I need to tell you something," they both said simultaneously, prompting nervous smiles. "You first," Raymond conceded. "I received a job offer from the hospital where I had the interview that day." Louisa took a deep breath, looking directly at him. "It's a good opportunity with health insurance and growth potential." Raymond visibly paled but maintained his composure. "I understand. When would you start?" "I haven't accepted yet," she replied. "Actually, I wanted to talk to you before deciding." "Why?" His question was simple, but loaded with potential meanings. "Because what happens here between the four of us isn't just a job for me," Louisa finally admitted. "Sophia and you have become important to us, and I fear that by accepting this job, I would be breaking something precious we've built." Raymond stood up, approaching slowly. "Do you know what I was going to tell you? I had a conversation with my mother yesterday. For the first time in years, I was completely honest about my feelings, about what I want for my life and for Sophia." "And what do you want?" Louisa asked almost in a whisper. "A family based on real values, not appearances. A partner who sees Sophia as a person, not an heiress. Someone who understands me not for what I have, but for who I am." He paused, gently touching her face. "I want you, Louisa. You and Annie." The phone rang, interrupting the moment. Raymond answered, his expression transforming from tender to worried in seconds. "Sophia is feeling unwell at school," he explained after hanging up. "We need to pick her up now." Momentarily forgetting their personal conversation, both hurried out. At the school, they found Sophia in the infirmary, pale and with a high fever. The school doctor suspected a viral infection, recommending observation at home and medication to lower her temperature. Over the next 2 days, Louisa and Raymond took turns caring for Sophia, forming a natural and complementary partnership. He worked remotely from his daughter's room, while Louisa prepared nutritious soups and applied cold compresses to bring down the fever. Annie, worried about her friend, made colorful drawings to brighten the room and read stories to distract her. On the evening of the second day, when Sophia finally fell asleep after her fever broke, Raymond found Louisa in the kitchen, preparing tea. "You're incredible," he said simply. "I can't imagine going through this without you." Louisa smiled, exhausted but satisfied. "Sophia is a warrior. She reminds me a lot of you in her determination. And you in your kindness," he added, approaching her. "Louisa, about our interrupted conversation. I want you to know that I respect any decision you make about the job. But I also want you to know that my feelings are real and won't change, regardless of your professional choice." The moment was interrupted by the phone. It was Mrs. Carmen calling to check on her granddaughter. Realizing that Raymond avoided mentioning Louisa's presence, she understood that there was still a long road ahead. Social differences wouldn't magically disappear, and family acceptance would be a process, not an event. That night, returning home with Annie asleep in her arms, Louisa made her decision. It wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long time, she felt she was choosing a path not merely out of necessity or fear, but out of conviction and hope. What she didn't know was that her decision would be tested in ways she couldn't foresee, and that the real challenge was yet to come. The next morning, Louisa called the hospital and politely declined the job offer. She explained that her current situation allowed for greater flexibility to care for her daughter, something she couldn't give up at that moment. Dr. Beatrice, surprisingly, showed understanding. "It's rare to find people who prioritize family well-being over professional opportunities," the doctor commented. "If you change your mind in the coming months, please get in touch." That small conversation reinforced Louisa's conviction. Choosing to stay with Raymond and Sophia didn't mean giving up her values or dignity. On the contrary, it was an affirmation that genuine care and emotional bonds were above immediate material advantages. When she arrived at the Miller's apartment that afternoon, she found Sophia already recovered, playing animatedly with a school friend. Raymond was working in his office but came out when he heard her arrival. "I need to show you something," he said, leading her to the balcony while the girls were distracted. On the small glass table, a white envelope awaited. "What is this?" Louisa asked. "Open it," Raymond encouraged with an enigmatic smile. Inside, Louisa found a formal contract, printed on the letterhead of a renowned law firm. Confused, she began to read the terms and felt her heart race. It was a completely different employment contract from the verbal agreement they had. This one designated her as Educational and Child Development Coordinator, with a significantly higher salary, paid vacation, health insurance for her and Annie, and an annual bonus linked to the performance of Raymond's company. "What does this mean?" she asked, confused. "It means you deserve professional recognition for what you truly do," Raymond explained. "You're not just a caregiver, Louisa. You're helping to shape Sophia's character, to develop her social and emotional skills, to create a healthy environment for her growth." Louisa shook her head, touched but resistant. "Raymond, this seems, I don't know, like a way to buy me." "No," he replied firmly. "It's a way to establish that regardless of what happens between us personally, your work has objective value and deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. This contract guarantees your autonomy and security." The conversation was interrupted by Sophia, who came to say goodbye to her friend who was leaving. When they were alone again, Raymond continued, "I don't want you to stay with me out of financial need or gratitude. I want any choice you make to be based solely on your feelings. That's why this contract, to balance the scales a bit." That gesture, more than any romantic declaration, showed that Raymond truly understood and respected her. After a lifetime of being treated as disposable in previous jobs, having her professional worth recognized in a tangible way was deeply significant. "I'll think about it," Louisa replied, carefully putting the envelope in her bag. In the following days, their relationship continued to evolve, now with a mutual awareness of the feelings they shared. Small gestures took on new meanings. A coffee prepared in the morning, a text message asking if she needed anything from the store, Raymond's hand gently resting on her back as they talked in the kitchen. The girls noticed the subtle change in the atmosphere, though they didn't fully understand its nature. Sophia, in particular, seemed to flourish with the new dynamic, as if instinctively sensing that her family was reconfiguring itself in a positive way. One Friday, after weeks of this gradual rapprochement, Raymond finally gathered the courage to formalize the invitation he had been planning. "I'd like you and Annie to come to dinner tomorrow. A special dinner, just the four of us, he invited, a slight blush betraying his nervousness. Not as employee and employer, but as us. Louisa accepted, equally nervous and hopeful. On Saturday, she dressed with special care, wearing a simple but elegant dress she had bought especially for the occasion, and styled her curly hair in an elaborate updo she had learned from online tutorials. Annie, sensing the importance of the moment, insisted on wearing her favorite dress, and even allowed her mother to tie her hair with colorful ribbons. The dinner was magical in its simplicity. Raymond cooked personally, with the clumsy but enthusiastic help of Sophia. The table on the balcony was decorated with fresh flowers and candles, and soft music played in the background. The children, sensitive to the romantic atmosphere, behaved with surprising maturity, though they couldn't contain occasional knowing giggles. After dessert, a milk pudding that had been a specialty of Raymond's family for generations, Sophia solemnly stood up. "Annie and I made something for you," she announced, pulling her friend by the hand to the room. When they returned, they carried a large, colorful poster, decorated with elaborate drawings and magazine cutouts. In the center, in huge multicolored letters, it read, "We want to be a real family." Below, there were 4 stick figures clearly representing each of them, holding hands under a large red heart. On the borders, phrases like "Mommy Louisa" and "Annie, my sister" were written in Sophia's uneven handwriting. Louisa felt tears well up in her eyes. Beside her, Raymond seemed equally moved. The girls waited anxiously, holding hands, their eyes bright with hope. "Did you plan this?" Raymond asked, his voice choked. "It was Sophia's idea," Annie replied shyly, "but I helped with the drawings." "So?" Sophia pressed, impatient. "Can we be a real family? With our own house and everything?" Louisa and Raymond exchanged glances, a silent understanding passing between them. They had planned an adult and mature conversation about the future of their relationship, considering all the obstacles and complexities. Instead, the children's crystal-clear sincerity brought them face to face with the essence of the matter. "I think this is an important conversation," Louisa began cautiously, aware of the expectation in the girl's eyes. "Forming a family is a big decision that affects all of us." "But you like each other," Sophia protested. "I see the way Daddy looks at you when he thinks no one's watching. It's just like in the soap operas." Raymond laughed, hugging his daughter. "You're very observant, Princess, and you're right about my feelings." He then turned to Louisa, taking her hands. "I very much want us to be a family, just the way the girls drew it. But I respect your time and know there are many issues to consider." To everyone's surprise, it was Annie who asked the direct question, "Mum, do you love Uncle Raymond?" Confronted with the disconcerting simplicity of the question, Louisa felt all her defenses crumble. "Yes, Annie, I do." The confession, made first to her daughter and not to the man in front of her, brought tears to Raymond's eyes. He approached, embracing Louisa with an intensity that conveyed everything words could not express at that moment. The girls celebrated with jumps and shouts, holding the poster like a manifesto of victory. For them, the matter was settled. They would be a family. The adults, however, knew that the journey had only just begun. That night, after the children finally fell asleep, Sophia had insisted that Annie sleep over at her house, for a special almost sister sleepover. Raymond and Louisa were able to talk with the honesty the moment demanded. "My family won't accept it easily," Raymond admitted as they shared a bottle of wine on the balcony. "Especially my mother. She has very specific expectations about whom I should rebuild my life with." "And does that worry you?" Louisa asked insecurely. "Not in the way you imagine," he replied, caressing her face. "It worries me how much they can hurt you and Annie with prejudices and judgments. My mother can be relentless when crossed." "I'm not as fragile as I seem," Louisa smiled with determination. "Raising a daughter alone in the outskirts of New York City taught me to deal with adversity. But I worry about Sophia. How will she handle her grandmother's disapproval?" "Sophia loves her grandmother, but she has already shown to have very firm opinions of her own," Raymond reflected. "Furthermore, I've observed how much more secure and happy she's become since you two entered our lives. That counts for more than any family tradition." They decided to proceed with caution. The first step would be a period of official dating, allowing everyone, and especially the children, to adjust to the new dynamic. Louisa would maintain her formal job as Sophia's educational coordinator. but they would begin to spend more time together as a family on weekends and holidays. The plan was sensible and structured, exactly how Raymond liked to conduct business. What neither of them could foresee was how destiny would intervene, dramatically accelerating the course of events. 2 weeks later, an unexpected visit would change everything. Mrs. Carman, determined to personally verify the strange stories Sophia had been telling on the phone about the family they were forming, appeared unannounced at her son's apartment on a Tuesday afternoon. What she found was a simple but revealing domestic scene. Louisa sitting at the kitchen table, helping Sophia and Annie with math homework. The naturalness with which the three interacted, the confidence with which Louisa moved through the space, and especially the genuine smile on her granddaughter's face, all of this struck Mrs. Carman unexpectedly. "Grandma," Sophia exclaimed upon seeing her running to hug her, "did you come to meet my new sister, Annie?" The silence that followed was deafening. Louisa stood up, embarrassed but dignified, and formally greeted the matriarch. Annie, sensing the tension, remained quiet, observing the situation with the attentive eyes she had inherited from her mother. "Sophia, why don't you and your little friend go play in the room while I talk with the young lady?" Mrs. Carman suggested with false gentleness. "She's not the young lady, Grandma. She's Aunt Louisa, who's going to be my new mom," Sophia corrected with the brutal honesty of children. "Daddy said it might take a while to make it official, but we're already a family in our hearts." Mrs. Carman visibly paled. Before she could respond, Louisa intervened with kindness. "Sophia, why don't you and Annie go ahead with that science project while I talk to your grandmother? That way you'll have more time to play afterward." The girls left reluctantly, leaving the two women in a silent confrontation. Mrs. Carman, regaining her composure, was direct. "So, it's true. You've won over my son and my granddaughter." "I haven't won over anyone, ma'am," Louisa replied calmly. "We've built a relationship based on mutual respect and genuine affection, and a well-paid job." "So I suppose," the matriarch retorted with venom. Louisa took a deep breath, resisting the urge to respond in kind. "Mrs. Carman, I understand your concerns. In your shoes, I would also be cautious about someone outside your social circle approaching the family." "You have no idea of my place," Mrs. Carman cut in. But something in her tone had softened. "Actually, I do," Louisa continued, surprising herself with her courage. "I am a single mother, as you were after your husband passed away early. I read about it in the reports about your family's company. I know what it's like to fight to protect your child, to secure their future. The difference is that you had financial resources, while I only had my work and determination." The mention of her own history seemed to momentarily destabilize Mrs. Carman, who slowly sat down in one of the kitchen chairs. "You researched our family." "I researched the family of the man I love," Louisa corrected. "I wanted to understand his world, just as he strives to understand mine." A heavy silence hung between them, broken only by the distant laughter of the girls coming from the bedroom. Finally, Mrs. Carman spoke, her voice more subdued. "Beatrice, Raymond's wife, was like a daughter to me. When we lost her, something in our family core broke. Raymond isolated himself, Sophia withdrew. And she hesitated, an unexpected vulnerability emerging in her gaze. "I feared we would never recover as a family." Louisa nodded, understanding the pain behind the hostility. "I am not here to replace anyone or erase memories. Sophia will always know who her biological mother was and her importance." "She calls you new mother," Mrs. Carman observed, but without the previous accusation. "Children have an incredible capacity to love broadly," Louisa replied. "For Sophia, having affection for me doesn't lessen her love for the mother who passed away, just as having Annie as a sister doesn't diminish her connection with you as a grandmother." Something in the sincerity of that answer seemed to touch Mrs. Carman. She observed Louisa with new eyes, noticing for the first time not only the simplicity of her clothes or her humble origin, but the intelligence in her gaze, the dignity in her posture, the authenticity in her words. "Does Raymond know I'm here?" she finally asked. "No, he's in an important meeting today," Louisa replied. "If he knew, he probably would have postponed it to be present." "Always protecting others," Mrs. Carman murmured, more to herself than to Louisa. "Raymond has been like that since he was a child. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of the intercom. It was Raymond, arriving earlier than usual. The tense atmosphere he encountered upon entering made it clear that something significant had happened. "Mother, I didn't know you were coming today," he commented, concerned by Louisa's serious expression. "I came to get to know your family better," Mrs. Carman replied, the last word carrying an unexpected emotional weight. "Sophia told me about your plans." Raymond cast a questioning glance at Louisa, who made a discreet, calming gesture. The children, hearing his voice, ran into the living room. "Daddy!" "Grandma came to see our family project," Sophia exclaimed, proudly showing the poster they had made, now framed and hanging on the living room wall, a decision by Raymond that demonstrated his commitment. The moment that followed could have been one of open confrontation, ultimatums, and family ruptures. Instead, to everyone's surprise, Mrs. Carman simply observed the poster, her expression softening as she saw the genuine happiness on her granddaughter's face. "It's a very beautiful project, darling," she finally commented, her voice betraying contained emotion. Turning to Raymond, she continued, "Your father always said that a man's true wealth lies in the family he builds, not in the one he inherits." The meaning of those words did not go unnoticed. It wasn't an enthusiastic blessing, but neither was it a rejection. It was the first hesitant step towards acceptance. That night, after Mrs. Carman left with the promise to return on Sunday for lunch, to get to know Annie better, she justified. Louisa and Raymond contemplated what had happened. "I've never seen my mother back down from a formed opinion," he commented, still surprised. "What did you say to her?" "The truth," Louisa replied simply, "that we are not erasing the past, just building a future where all memories and all loves can fit." Embracing on the balcony under the starry New York City sky, observing the city lights that housed such distinct and now interconnected worlds, they felt that the most difficult part might already be over. They didn't yet know that the true test of their union was still to come, not in the form of family disapproval, but an opportunity that would force Louisa to make the hardest choice of her life. 4 months passed since Mrs. Carman's unexpected visit. Going against all expectations, the Miller matriarch had begun a cautious process of rapprochement with Louisa and Annie. It started with small gestures, an invitation for tea, questions about Annie's school, a box of children's books that were left over in her library. Gradually, the initial resistance transformed into curiosity and sometimes into genuine interest. Raymond and Louisa's relationship solidified each day. He had formally invited her to visit his company, proudly introducing her to his closest partners and employees. She, in turn, had taken him to meet her community, introducing him to the neighbor who had always looked after Annie, to the capoeira teacher who kept children off the streets, to the Residents' Association, where she volunteered in her free time. The girls became increasingly inseparable, developing their own language and shared dreams. Sophia helped Annie with English. Annie taught Sophia how to make string bracelets and creative origami from recycled paper. Together, they transformed differences into complementarity. On a seemingly ordinary Tuesday, Louisa received a call that would change the course of events. It was Dr. Beatrice from St. Francis Hospital. "Louisa, I know you declined our previous offer, but an exceptional opportunity has arisen that I believe you should consider," the doctor explained. An American university is funding a hospital management training program for promising professionals from diverse backgrounds. There are only 5 spots nationwide with a full scholarship, including housing and a living allowance for one dependent. Louisa's heart raced. It was an extraordinary opportunity, the kind that appears once in a lifetime and can completely alter a professional trajectory. "How long does the program last?" she asked, her mind already calculating implications. 2 years, Dr. Beatrice replied. "But the qualification is internationally recognized and practically guarantees leadership positions upon your return. We nominated your name based on your interview and the exceptional references we received." Louisa promised to consider the proposal and hung up, deeply disturbed. 2 years away would mean leaving behind not only Raymond and Sophia, but everything they had been building together. On the other hand, it was the chance for a career she had never imagined possible, to provide a brilliant future for Annie, to transform herself professionally. For days, she carried that dilemma alone. She watched the girls playing, the affection with which Raymond treated Annie as if she were his own daughter, the imperfect but genuine harmony they had built. How could she consider abandoning all of this? But how could she not consider an opportunity that would change their lives forever? On Friday, after putting the girls to bed, she found Raymond working in his office. Gathering courage, she told him about the proposal. "That's impressive," he replied after a long silence, his expression unreadable. "Quite a recognition of your potential." "I haven't decided anything yet," Louisa hastened to explain. "But you're seriously considering it," Raymond observed. "Not as an accusation, but as a statement of fact." "How can I not consider it?" Louisa sat down, exhausted by the weight of the decision. "It's an opportunity that people like me rarely receive. It would completely change the possibilities for Annie." Raymond stood up, walking to the window. The heavy silence between them was laden with contradictory emotions: pride, fear, uncertainty. "Don't you think I should accept?" Louisa asked, anxious for the first time since she had met him. "What I think," he replied slowly, "is that you are the most extraordinary person I have ever met, and that you deserve every opportunity life offers." He turned to face her, his eyes bright with contained emotion. "What I also think is that 2 years is a very long time for us to be apart." "I know," Louisa whispered, her voice choked. "When do they need an answer?" "Monday." Raymond nodded thoughtfully. "This weekend, let's just be together as a family. On Monday, whatever your decision, I will support it completely." On Saturday, Raymond surprised everyone with a special outing, a picnic at the exact spot where, almost a year ago, Louisa had saved Sophia from the accident. It was a small park near the hospital, now familiar to all of them. "Why here, Daddy?" Sophia asked curiously as she helped spread the checkered blanket on the grass. "Because this is where our family began," he replied simply. "Sometimes it's important to go back to the beginning to better understand the path." The day was perfect in its simplicity. Games, stories, laughter, the simple pleasure of being together under the open sky. If Louisa and Raymond carried the weight of an imminent decision, they didn't allow it to overshadow the joy of the moment. On Sunday, Mrs. Carmen joined them for lunch at the house Raymond had recently bought, a spacious property in a quiet neighborhood, equidistant from his work and the girls' school. The house was still partially empty, awaiting furniture and decoration they would choose together, a symbol of the future they were planning. "So, when will the official move be?" Mrs. Carmen asked, as they had coffee on the porch after lunch, the girls exploring the newly landscaped backyard. Louisa and Raymond exchanged significant glances. "We're still planning the details," Raymond replied vaguely. Mrs. Carmen, much more perceptive than they supposed, immediately noticed the underlying tension. "Has something happened that I should know about?" To Raymond's surprise, it was Louisa who answered honestly, recounting the proposal she had received and the dilemma she faced. She expected judgment or even satisfaction from the matriarch, but what she found was unexpected understanding. "I understand your hesitation better than you imagine," Mrs. Carmen commented after listening carefully. "When my husband passed away, I received an offer to sell the family business for an extraordinary sum. It would have meant guaranteed financial security, without the risks of managing a growing business as a single woman in an era even more misogynistic than today." "And what made you refuse?" Louisa asked, genuinely curious. "Who said I refused?" Mrs. Carmen smiled enigmatically. "Actually, I initially accepted. I even signed the preliminary documents." Raymond's eyes widened, clearly surprised by a story he had never heard. "What happened then?" "I realized I was choosing security over meaning," the matriarch replied thoughtfully. "Money would solve practical problems, but the company was your father's legacy, something we could build together, even if he was no longer physically present." Louisa nodded, deeply understanding the parallel Mrs. Carmen was drawing. "I'm not saying your situation is identical," the matriarch continued. "A career is also an important legacy. I merely suggest that you consider not only the material or professional gains, but the deeper meaning of each path." When Mrs. Carmen left, she left behind not only a new perspective for Louisa, but also a small box for Raymond, with a note: "I use this in moments of important decisions. Perhaps it's time to pass it on." Inside the box, an old pocket watch, that had belonged to Raymond's father, engraved with the words, "Time reveals the value of choices." That night, after putting the girls to bed, Louisa and Raymond sat on the porch of the new house, still partially empty, but already imbued with possibilities. The pocket watch rested between them, a silent testament to decisions that shape generations. "Have you decided?" Raymond asked softly. "Yes," Louisa replied with surprising serenity. "Actually, I think I knew the answer from the beginning, but I needed to go through the whole process to be sure." "And what is it?" "I'm going to call Dr. Beatrice tomorrow and thank her for the opportunity, but decline it," Louisa replied. "Not because I'm afraid of change, or because I'm choosing a man over my career, but because I realize that what we've built here is rarer and more precious than any academic title." Raymond took a deep breath, the relief evident on his face, though he tried to conceal it. "Are you sure? We could find a way. Perhaps frequent visits, daily calls." "I'm sure," Louisa affirmed with conviction. "Besides, I have other professional plans." "What are they?" Raymond asked, surprised. "I've been talking with some mothers in the community where I used to live," she explained. "Many are single parents like I was, facing the same challenges: lack of support, difficulty balancing work and childcare, prejudice in the job market." Raymond listened attentively, recognizing the sparkle of determination in her eyes. "I'm thinking of creating a community support program," Louisa continued. "Something that offers not only practical assistance, like a cooperative daycare and a job opportunity bank, but also emotional support and professional training." "A support network," Raymond summarized admiringly. "Exactly. Something I desperately needed myself and never had. To transform my experience into a bridge for other women." Raymond took her hands, deeply moved by the vision she shared. "Count on me for everything you need for this project. I can contribute not only financially, but with my management experience, network of contacts, legal structure." "I don't want it to be just your project supporting my idea," Louisa interrupted. "I want it to be our project as a family. Something the girls can follow and understand the value of reaching out to those in need." In that moment, contemplating the starry sky above the house they would share, they sealed not only a romantic commitment, but a partnership of purpose. The next morning, Louisa called Dr. Beatrice, sincerely thanking her for the opportunity, but explaining that she had chosen another path. To her surprise, the doctor received the news with understanding. "In a way, I already expected that answer," she confessed. "But I needed to offer the chance, so that whatever your choice, it would truly be yours and not imposed by circumstances." 2 weeks later, the family gathered for a small and intimate wedding ceremony in the garden of their new home. The girls, dressed as matching bridesmaids, scattered flower petals along the makeshift path to an arch decorated with wildflowers, Louisa's personal choice, as she preferred authentic simplicity to ostentatious luxury. To everyone's surprise, Mrs. Carman not only attended, but insisted on helping Louisa with the final preparations, adjusting the flower crown in her loose curly hair and handing her a delicate antique brooch. "It was my grandmother's," she explained, fastening the jewel to Louisa's simple but elegant dress, something old to continue the family tradition. The gesture, more than any words, symbolized complete acceptance. They were no longer different worlds, just an expanded family, imperfect in its differences, but strengthened by them. During the ceremony, the girls surprised everyone with a special gift, a framed and enhanced version of the poster they had made months earlier, now with the addition of a baby in Louisa's arms. "For the future," Sophia explained with a mischievous smile, eliciting nervous laughter from the newlyweds. 1 year after that simple ceremony, Louisa's community project, now called Bridge Network, was already serving dozens of single mothers from the outskirts. With Raymond's strategic support and Mrs. Carman's surprising contribution, who had discovered a late vocation for mentoring entrepreneurial women, the initiative grew organically. The project's physical space, an old renovated warehouse in the South End, buzzed with activities, vocational workshops, a co-working space with integrated daycare, voluntary legal consulting, emotional support groups. Louisa coordinated everything with the competence she had always demonstrated, now amplified by adequate resources and a solid support network. On a special afternoon celebrating the network's first anniversary, the entire family gathered for a symbolic moment, the inauguration of the community library, whose initial collection had been entirely donated by Mrs. Carmen, who had made sure to include books across various reading levels and themes. As they watched the women and children animatedly exploring the space, Sophia discreetly tugged at Louisa's sleeve. "Mommy, that girl over there, isn't that the one who was crying in the supermarket? The one with the yogurt?" Louisa followed her daughter's gaze, immediately recognizing the child she had witnessed being humiliated by her wealthy mother on that crucial day when she made her decision. Now the girl smiled shyly, flipping through an illustrated book while her mother chatted with one of the project coordinators. Approaching cautiously, Louisa greeted the woman, introducing herself as the founder of the initiative. To her surprise, the woman recognized her. "You saw me that day at the supermarket, didn't you?" she asked, visibly embarrassed. "At my worst moment as a mother." "We all have difficult moments," Louisa replied gently. "That was my turning point," the woman confided. "I realized what I was becoming, trapped in an abusive marriage, taking out my frustrations on my daughter. A week later, I packed the essentials and left home, leaving behind material comfort, but taking our dignity." Louisa listened attentively as the woman, Marina, recounted her journey of the past few months. The struggle to rebuild herself professionally after years as a trophy wife, the process of emotional reconnection with her daughter, the discovery of her own worth beyond social status. "I learned about this project through an online support group," Marina explained. "I never imagined I would find here not only practical resources, but a sense of community." In that moment, watching Sophia and Annie playing naturally with Marina's daughter, as if the social barriers that once seemed insurmountable had never existed, Louisa understood the magnitude of what they had built. Not just a recombined family or a social project, but a web of human connections that transcended the artificial divisions of society. Raymond approached, carrying little Michael, just 4 months old, the fruit of the love that had grown from the most improbable circumstances. Beside him, Mrs. Carmen chatted animatedly with one of the ladies from the community, exchanging recipes and life stories with surprising naturalness. "Everything okay?" Raymond asked, noticing his wife's contemplative expression. "Better than ever," Louisa replied, observing the full circle life had drawn. "I'm just thinking about how it all began. A lost interview, a girl running after a ball, an averted accident. The universe conspiring in our favor," Raymond smiled, adjusting the baby in his arms, or simply the result of choosing, at every moment, to act with courage and care, Louisa reflected. "Even when it seems easier to look the other way, to move on, to protect only our own." Sophia approached, pulling Annie by the hand. "Mommy, can we show our presentation now?" "Everyone's here." Louisa nodded, following the girls to the small makeshift stage. The two had prepared a presentation about the meaning of family, illustrated with drawings and photos of the journey they had shared over the past 2 years. Watching her daughters speak with ease and conviction about how bonds of love transcend blood and circumstances, Louisa felt a profound certainty her decision to stay, to build bridges instead of going it alone, had been not only correct, but transformative on levels she could never have foreseen. In her lap, Michael slept peacefully, oblivious to the significance of that moment, but a direct beneficiary of the chain of choices that had begun with a simple instinctive gesture of protection. Beside her, Raymond held her hand, a silent but constant support, as he had been since their lives intertwined. When the girls finished their presentation, the audience applauded enthusiastically. Mrs. Carmen, visibly moved, was the first to stand up, walking over to Louisa for a sincere embrace that was worth more than 1,000 words. 5 years after that first unexpected encounter, they had built not just a family, but a community. Not just a home, but a shared purpose. The journey had not been without obstacles. Prejudices still arose occasionally. Family adaptations required constant patience. The balance between work and family always demanded adjustments. But with each challenge faced together, they strengthened the conviction that Sophia and Annie had expressed so simply in that first poster. They were a real family, not by convention or appearance, but by the daily commitment to choose each other, to build bridges over differences, to transform chance into purpose. And perhaps that was the true lesson Louisa had learned on that extraordinary journey. When we act with genuine courage and care, we don't just save others, we save ourselves, revealing possibilities of connection and meaning that transcend the artificial barriers society imposes between human beings. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the journey of Louisa, Raymond and their daughters has touched your hearts. To continue on this journey of emotions and reflections on the unexpected connections that transform our lives, we have prepared a special playlist with equally engaging stories. Find it here by clicking to the left of your video. If this narrative stirred something in you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your like. These small gestures help us continue sharing stories that celebrate the courage to build bridges where others only see abysses. We await you in the comments to know which moment of this story touched your heart the most.